Hi, I'm Anina Moore, and I am the Director of Communications for the Texas Commission on the Arts. Along with Derek, I manage the Poetry Out Loud program for the state of Texas, and we want to thank you for joining us and just let you know a little bit more about Laura Van Prooyen, our speaker for today. I met Laura when she was a teacher participating in Poetry Out Loud, and she had students who placed very highly in our state competition, including one who went on to represent the state at the national competition and do very well there. And in addition to being a longtime teacher, Laura also is a poet. So she comes at this from both sides as a writer and as a teacher. And she also is the co-author of Text Structures from Poetry, which we'll be talking about a little bit more in our next session. So with that, I just want to welcome Laura and remind you that any resources that you might be looking for about Poetry Out Loud in general is at poetryoutloud.org, and that is the national website. Thank you.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming on, especially at the end of your long school day. Everything that I go through here in the documents that I share with you, I have given to Derek, so he can email them to you after this session. And I'm going to just jump right in. So this first session, I had said that we would talk about, like, how do you make Poetry Out Loud work for you and make it so it's not more work for you if you want to implement this in your school, because I'm well aware of that. People get a little afraid of, it sounds great, but how do I make this work? So I just want to go through very quickly how I made it work at the high school where I taught. I was at a very small charter high school, so we had some flexibility, but I did have to get my administration on board. And when they learned about the program, they got very excited about it. And I was teaching creative writing, and I had 2 or 3 or 4, it's coming back to me, 4 classes of students. And the way that I worked it into my curriculum was that one of the first things I did was I required all of my students in the class as an assignment to memorize a poem. This was just part of our curriculum, and this, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. This ties right into the TEKS, and let me grab this real quick. So this is a TEKS alignment document that if you go to the session 2 will also apply there. But in these grade level TEKS, you have these things of listening, speaking, reading, thinking through the text critically. So I had all of the students required to memorize a poem. And the way that I did this to make it very easy was when I went to the Poetry Out Loud anthology online, I did not let all 4 of my classes loose online to pick whatever they wanted, because that we would have never proceeded. So what I did was I chose about 10 to 20 poems that they could choose from, and then the very ambitious students could choose anything they wanted, because you'll always have 1 or 2 who say, but I want to choose something else. That was fine. But to fulfill the requirement, everyone had to choose at least 1, you know, in that packet of 10 to 20. Then, because I had a lot of kids with a lot of anxiety about public speaking, what I did was they would come to me individually. And if you're teaching virtually, you know, if you have the capacity to have one-on-one with your student, they got to recite the poem to me individually for their grade. At this point, the students, the ones who were really, really excited, they wanted to keep proceeding. And this is in effect how we got our students for the all school competition. So I didn't hold what was really a classroom competition per se, because everybody had to participate. And then it was nearly almost like, not even auditions, because it just kind of naturally happened. Those students who were very excited, then I would play it to them and say, do you want to be in the the school-wide competition, and they all were, and so then we'd practice together in that way. So this is really what they would do too, is since there was a packet of 10 to 20 poems, students would practice together, which goes right here with these TEKS as well. Listening, speaking, reading, writing, thinking, using multiple texts, and also of their own selection, because they did get a choice between their 10 to 20, just not a choice of hundreds and hundreds. Then they would practice together. They would analyze the text, and we would use resources like, I'm going to throw this one up here. This is directly from the Poetry Out Loud website, which is the tone map. And this is downloadable from Poetry Out Loud. And this is something else I would have them do when they were memorizing their poem. Then they would use this chart for their own poem. You know, we would go sort of line by line or chunk by chunk, or they would do this with a friend. And the words at the end of this tone map are really great. There's a whole chart so they can find, what is this tone of this voice? What is this? And they would apply that to their own poem, and that too goes right into the TEKS of analyzing the text. Plus you get to give a grade. At my school, we had to give 2 grades per week, and sometimes that was hard to do. So they had daily grades for these things as well. If you have questions while I'm talking, I'm making sure that I'm hitting the things in the time frame. Please do put them in the chat for Derek, and he'll bring them to me. At my school, I was able to collaborate with the theater teacher. Happily, we liked each other too, so that made things very easy, but she was able to help me a lot with the performance. And a lot of the students who were interested in reciting and memorizing the poems were students who were already accustomed to doing things for auditions, monologues, memorizing things. And so even just talking to your fellow teachers, especially if they're in the theater arts, to, you know, sort of feel like, do you have any students who might like to do this? Do you have any students who would also be interested in this? And that's where we got our students from my creative writing classes and her theater classes, who were often the same students because we were at a small school, to compete in that school-wide competition. Now, whatever the culture is in your school, I'm giving you what the culture was like in mine. So you would adapt to whatever that is, because the culture in my school, we had a school-wide competition, and we did this one time during the day, the first year I ran it, and the other time we did it after school. And we encouraged as many students from the school to come and see the competition. I had mine pretty formal, where I had the students on a stage, and I had 3 judges that I drew from the community. I have been a judge. I want to just say about judging, you can pull your judges from your internal school too. Your fellow teachers, the fine arts teacher, another English teacher, those can be your judges. You don't have to go to outside sources. But if you are in a community where there's a literary organization, or there's colleges with graduate programs, a lot of times grad students would love to come be a judge because they're looking for that kind of experience. So you can call a creative writing department and ask. But if you don't have time for that, I get it, and start asking your teachers first, like go internal. So we did our school-wide competition after school, and the students would recite their 2 poems, and if you haven't been to the Poetry Out Loud website, all of the scoring and judging and all of that is up there. And you can tabulate it. We tabulated it all in real time and had our results immediately. So then we knew which student would proceed to state. I want to backtrack one quick second to another way I gave daily grades and how I also implemented Poetry Out Loud. And my Poetry Out Loud unit was roughly 2 to 3 weeks, which was memorize a poem, analyze that poem, and then we would turn it into a creative writing assignment for themselves. And you could do this with essays or anything. Again, this document is shareable, and it is totally okay with me if you just change your name at the top and use this assignment. I mean, we're teachers, after all, that's what we do. So this, after they memorized their poem and they recited it to me, or they were moving on in the class, then I had them choose 2 words from their poem of their choice to incorporate in original writing of their own. And at my school, they really wanted rubrics for creative writing because they were mystified. How do you assess creative writing? So I had to come up with quantifiable data for things. So if this looks, that this really isn't the way I love to engage with creative writing, but it works when you have to have these rubrics where if they meet the guidelines of the assignment, do they do at least 5 of these things? So if your school really wants you to have rubrics for these two, please take this and use it. And this way you have at least 3 or 4 or 5 grades coming out of in your grade book from Poetry Out Loud with things you probably were going to be teaching anyway, how to engage with texts, how to self-select texts, reading and sharing those things, critically analyzing them, discussing them, which brings us right back to those TEKS that we were starting with. These are the grade level TEKS. Here's like English 1 through 4, strand 5. Analyze the use of text and structure to achieve author's purpose. Compose literary text, such as fiction poetry, using genre characteristics of the craft. That little creative writing assignment I showed you would be strand 6 right there in the writing part. So you can see that Poetry Out Loud will help you actually meet your goals that you have within your schools and the TEKS, while also giving your students access to the state competition, which is great. And we actually won some money for our library at the time. Like the person who wins state wins money for the library. I was in a really underfunded school with very few resources. So truth be told, we didn't have a library. So it allowed us to buy books so I could house a library in my classroom. And when the year that we went to Washington, D.C., which you would do virtually, it was a really big deal for my students to know that they were competing with the chance of a $20,000 scholarship. And you know, there is real money that comes from these things, and the money might not be the thing that motivates you all, but it made my administration really take a second look when I put the program in front of them. So let me see, I lost my little clock. Where are we on time? Derek, do you see? There we go. Oh, 4:15. One last thing. So Anina and the Texas Commission on the Arts, they have money available for coaching. I don't know if you're aware of that, but when you have your school-wide competition and you report your school winner, you call Anina and say, I would really love a coach. And they actually have money for that. And so both, maybe all 3 of the years I taught, I had access to a professional coach who came in and helped the students, in addition to me, and in addition to my theater teacher friend. So one of the coaches had this contract, and I thought it was a brilliant thing. And so I just wanted to share it with you because, you know, these are teenagers and they have a lot on their plates now more than ever. And they're going to be like, oh yeah, I want to do Poetry Out Loud. And then you can't find them again. So when they sign the contract, they really do see, they're like, oh my God, this is serious. This is like a real commitment. You're like, yeah, it really is. And so this was what the coach, she drew this up. I was like, dang, all right, they're going to do all that. Okay. But she wasn't playing around. And I don't know that the students did every single thing on this list, but I think it's really great to aim high. And they really did take this seriously. And some of them went on to colleges where they went into acting, or they received scholarships because of their experience where they felt very well skilled at this. So I think I've shared all the documents with you. The TEKS, which by the way, you are going to have access to a download, but should you want to find this online, that TEKS list is here at trailofbreadcrumbs.com. And this is my co-author Gretchen Burnaby's website. And there's this little tab that says TEKS and TEKS alignments. And that's where we were. And if you have interest in the next session, the book that I'm drawing from is right there, but they have other TEKS alignments for that. And if you don't know the Poetry Out Loud website, that's right here with all the logistics, all of the poetry collections. The very best thing I did was make that 10 to 20 poem little booklet for the students for the initial thing, because the first time I was like, oh, go there and pick. And there was a whole class period, 2 class periods where they were lost in the anthology. So that's when I realized that was my first mistake. So I condensed it down for them. So I would love to, we have like 3 minutes. So throw some questions my way if you would like to. I'm going to stop my screen share so I can see you all again. Oh, there, that's better. Okay.
And you're welcome, since we're in such a small group, to ask in the chat, or if you just want to unmute and ask a question of Laura. I had that link to Trail of Breadcrumbs, Laura, and put it up in the chat.
Great. And Derek, will you be emailing them the documents that I shared? Okay, so what you'll get is a copy of that contract, should you ever want to use it or whatever, the creative writing assignment that you can adapt. There's a PDF of those TEKS, but you can get them online and download them yourself. And I think that was it from this session. Great. Do you have any questions on judges, logistics, anything else I can help you with in this time?
I just want to say that it was so great. I really like what you said about that contract. I really like that contract because, as you said, teenagers do have so much on their plates these days, and it's great to have that structure. That contract just gives them that structure.
Yeah. What I found is they only take it as seriously as you do. So, because I was really into it. I really loved Poetry Out Loud. And I was grateful when the coach brought that contract, because I thought, you just upped it, man. The kids see it too. They were like, this is serious. I'm real. I got the whole, they felt really good signing that contract. So.
In the chat, Kendra says, I like the contract idea too. I always have a few that vanish. So thanks for that, Kendra.
Yeah.
And if you're watching the recording of this session, you will find the links that were mentioned in the details below. And also, you can email me if you would like the documents. That's Derek, D-E-R-E-K, at arts.texas.gov. And Nina, did you have anything you wanted to add to today's session?
Laura was great about talking about motivations for participating. One thing that didn't get mentioned is of course, like if a student is their school winner or represents the state, then that is another thing that they can note in their accolades as they're applying for college. And I've definitely heard several of our state winners kind of say that was of real benefit to them too.
And Laura, any last messages to everyone here?
I just threw my website in the chat. I want you all to feel free to reach out to me if something comes up later. Through my website, there's a contact form, or you can ask Derek for my email, which is fine. But I'm always happy to do what I can to support. And even if it's when you're looking at getting your competition together and you say, I have no idea where to find a judge, you can email me, and at the very least, I can offer some suggestions. Or if I know anyone who's in your town, then I would offer that too. So thank you, wonderful teachers. My gosh, hats off to you all.